Good day and a warm welcome to all who have joined us in this webinar. We will commence in 5 minutes. We would sincerely appreciate it if you could keep your microphone muted throughout the speeches and presentations to avoid any sound interruption. Thank you so much for your patience, and we will start shortly. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all who have joined us across the globe. A warm welcome to our webinar titled Higher Education During the COVID-19 Pandemic, a Global Perspective of the Challenges and Best Practices, a collaboration between the American Degree Transfer Program, Taylor's University, Malaysia, and the US Embassy, Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. This webinar brings together 8 US State Department alumni covering 4 continents, Asia, Europe, Americas, and Africa, comprising of various specializations to provide experiences and perspectives on our webinar topic. We are indeed glad to see that 892 participants from 26 countries have registered for this webinar. We are very privileged to have with us today Mr. Akash R. Suri, United States Embassy, Kuala Lumpur, Professor Philip M. Jose, New York University, USA, Ms. Prema Ponudure, Taylor's University, Malaysia, Mr. Wang Yong, Chongqing Council on International Education and Global Affairs, China, Dr. Timo Martikainen, University of Eastern Finland, Finland, Professor Dr. Faisal K.P. Aligarh, Muslim University, India, Professor Dr. Andre Luis Prudencio Sena, Rio de Janeiro State University, Brazil, Dr. Alexandra Anastasia Do, Hellenic Open University, Greece, Dr. Rusdiana Junaid, Universitas Chokra Minato, Palopo, Indonesia, and Professor Paulo Mahumain, University of Maputo, Mozambique. We are honored and fortunate to have all of them here to share their expertise and experiences with us. My name is Judith Nisa-Muller, a lecturer from the School of Liberal Arts and Sciences at Taylor's University, and I will be your host. Now, let's take a moment to watch a short video on the journey of our speakers in their 2017 Multinational Institute of American Studies program.
Ditaruh nggak mau rewel.
Before we continue with this session, I would like to highlight a few housekeeping announcements. Please do keep the microphones muted throughout the speeches and presentations to avoid any sound interruption. This session is recorded. There will be a Q&A session towards the end of this webinar. You may type in your questions and comments during that time, and it will be put forward to our speakers. A group photo will be taken after the opening remarks, so do be camera ready to turn on your camera for the photography session. Thank you, everyone. To start our session today, it is my pleasure to call upon Mr. Akash R. Suri, Assistant Cultural Affairs Officer, United States Embassy, Kuala Lumpur, for the opening remarks. The platform is yours, Mr. Akash.
Thank you so much. Just give me one moment here. Yes, thank you. Good evening, good morning, as Judith had mentioned, we have folks from all over the world. It's been really fun to see all the different countries and cultures represented as you all say hello from your nations in the chat box. I want to start just by saying thank you to Taylor's University and Southwest University for this collaboration, bringing together U.S. Exchanges alumni from different regions around the globe to offer their perspectives on an area of common interest to us all, which is education. Obviously, we're all a year and a half into this pandemic, which has changed everything about our lives, and of course, about the way we conduct our education systems. So I'm really glad we're all coming together in this setting to offer our views, concerns, challenges, and I hope a few silver linings about the situation we're all facing. For the US government and for our embassy here in Malaysia, education and international education in particular are an incredibly powerful tool that we invest a lot of resources in harnessing. We do this in a number of ways. We obviously encourage study abroad to the United States, but beyond that, we encourage study abroad generally, no matter where a student decides to go. We know that these study abroad experiences make our world a little bit smaller. They create lasting relationships and networks, and they force us all to get out of our comfort zones and think about our communities and the issues we face in a global context. Beyond study abroad, exchange programs are a big part of what we do as an embassy, including flagship programs like Fulbright and the International Visitor Leadership Program, youth-oriented programs like Waisili and Yali, and of course, SUSI, or the Study of the U.S. Institutes program, which focuses on faculty members, teachers, instructors, administrators, and others in education. I know many of our speakers tonight are SUSI alums, and I want to congratulate them all on going through that experience and sharing that with us here today. Through exchange programs like these ones, we try to share whatever expertise the US has to offer and also to learn from our visitors, who are themselves experts in their disciplines. We hope, and I hope our panelists this evening feel this way, that our exchange programs foster a lasting connection to the United States, and that these programs, again, make the world a little smaller and facilitate the sharing of expertise at the highest levels. Obviously, the pandemic has made study abroad and exchange programs quite difficult, though we're doing our best to work through that and still make some meaningful experiences and connections through the use of technology. So another way in which we try to prioritize education is by investing in educators themselves around the world. As I mentioned, we sometimes do this through exchange programs like SUSI, but also through workshops and by providing resources to instructors and educators. Because we know that by investing in educators, there's a unique multiplier effect to everything we do. When we hold workshops for teachers on media literacy or provide resources to help them do STEM activities in their classrooms, we're actually reaching the hundreds of students that they affect. And so we'll continue to work hard in all of these ways to use education to build bridges and invest in educators to help students around the world. I'll say that it's uniquely gratifying to be here this evening and see an entire panel of experts around the world that have been part of our programs. And I really want to thank them all again for sharing their expertise with us. The final thing I'll say is that while I'm sure we'll all learn about the challenges of being an educator or administrator during the pandemic, there are certainly a few things we've all learned during this time. And I hope those lessons and tools stay with us after this subsides. Programs like this one that bring together people from around the world are relatively new for me, and I see so much value in harnessing technology to make programs like this possible. With that, it's my pleasure to open this webinar on higher education during the COVID-19 pandemic, a global perspective of the challenges and best practices, and I look forward to the program. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Akash, for setting the stage for our webinar today. Now, before we move on, we would like to take a virtual group picture. So please switch on your cameras and give us your best smile. Okay, so we'll get everybody's cameras on. All right. Okay, so I will count to 3. 1, 2, 3. Moving on to the next slide. Okay. 1, 2, 3. All right, next screen. All right, thank you, everybody. Okay, great. Thank you, everybody, for that. Now, our first speaker for today, we are delighted to have Ms. Prema Ponudure, Head of Department of Liberal Arts and Humanities, School of Liberal Arts and Sciences, Taylor's University, Malaysia. Ms. Prema graduated in English Literature with honours from the University of Buckingham, England, completed her Masters in English as a second language from the University of Malaya, Malaysia, and completed a fellowship as a visiting scholar at New York University, USA. She has recently been appointed as a consultant for educational conventions with conference partner Sendirian Berhad. At Taylor's University, she oversees 3 programs: the American Degree Transfer Program, the Center for Languages, and the Bachelor of Performing Arts, Malaysia's first conservatory degree program in collaboration with the Actors Studio and Kuala Lumpur Performing Arts Center. Her main interests lie in international education, curriculum, and innovative pedagogies for enhancement in the teaching and learning environment. Ms. Prema, welcome, and the time is yours.
Thank you, Judith. Let me just share my screen. So welcome, everybody. Good day to everybody who's joining us around the world. It's a pleasure speaking and sharing our experiences that we've all been going through over this last 1.5 years. So I'll be looking at some of the challenges and that has been faced by Malaysia during this pandemic from the Malaysian perspective, and also leave you with hopefully 3 best practices that hopefully we can carry on. So as we know, the history of pandemics, this is not something new. We have experienced this before in the early 18th, 19th century. And we are currently now at globally at 219 million cases of the COVID-19. And this is actually the best time the world is in terms of technology, in terms of medical science and breakthrough. You know, it doesn't get better than this to overcome this at this point. So in the face of a pandemic, education is not something new. We've gone through this with the previous pandemics, where we had classrooms, isolations, SOPs, social distancing, and we've heard of all these terms: pandemic pedagogy, which has been applied even in war-torn countries. When there's any disruption to education, online learning, remote learning, these are all phrases that have already existed even before this pandemic. In Malaysia, this is usually on the right, is usually how we get the daily update of COVID cases in Malaysia. So overall, Malaysia has had about 1.8 million cases. These are the new cases as of today. We have 19,000 cases today. These are the ones who have recovered. These are the death rates. Today, the death is quite high. And overall, we've had about 17,883 deaths and active cases as well. So active cases that are ongoing, asymptomatic, and all of that. So, and these are cases that are in the ICU, which are critical, and these that need ventilators. And overall, in Malaysia, we've had 47.3% of our population is fully vaccinated. So as you know, in Malaysia, we also made sure that Mickey Mouse and T-Rex and Ultraman are also vaccinated. So and this is just Malaysians having a bit of fun at vaccination centers. So how has it grown in Malaysia since March 2020 till August? Yeah, the statistics, and this is how the COVID cases have grown. And the red arrows are when schools have been closed and reopened as the cases increase and decrease. And currently we are looking and hoping that we will be able to go back to some sort of face-to-face classes by end of October. Yeah. So some of the challenges that we have faced in Malaysia, first of all, externally, the slow immunization process in the beginning. University students are unvaccinated because they've only, the vaccination programs have been from 18 and above. Of course, the digital divide and e-learning tools and technological connectivity. So internally, in universities, digital access of staff and students. Of course, we have been using blended learning and all, which is only 20 or 30% of the full curriculum, but coming around a total 100% going online. So online teaching pedagogies as well. And of course, digital fatigue is setting in a year and a half already. And also the biggest concern was completion of components of the curriculum. So as in Mandarin, they say, in crisis, the two words in Mandarin is danger and opportunity. Yeah, so of course, there are a lot of challenges, but there are some opportunities and I'm going to just touch on these 5 areas. Administratively, as a university itself, in admission, enrollment, things like that, teaching and learning, academic collaboration, internships, and social well-being. So the first thing is with the pandemic, of course, students coming in and enrolling is a big challenge. So what we looked at is what I'm sharing with you is Levin's change management model, which looked at how you have an existing management admission system, administrative system, and how that has to rechange. You unfreeze, you change, and you refreeze. So you come up with new ways, sort of adapting and relearning how to do things. So this is one of the things that at a university level we did, because we had problems with IELTS, TOEFL, all these entrance exams being shut down centers. So this was a quick way that internally we developed the system to have the online tests done. Teaching and learning, what is platforms across the world, right? Everybody looked at what platforms they had: Zoom, Times, Teams, Moodle. Schools use Google Classroom. So all of those as well were implemented. Even in teaching for labs, we also had virtual labs, which we had bought and purchased as well for students learning. Online assessments, of course, as we move through the pandemic with the online teaching, assessments, right, for validity and integrity. So online proctored exams as well, although they are not 100%, but there is some sort of validity to the exams being taken. So using Moodle, Safe Browser, and also AI Proctor. So these are just some of the practices that can be implemented worldwide. Another aspect of that was available was the global classroom or internationalization. So with the American Degree Transfer Program, it's a 4-year degree where the students do 2 years with us. So they transfer after 2 years. They do 2 years with us and they transfer to the US after that. So what happens was this also provided an opportunity for us to be able to engage with US professors and have open collaborative classrooms, which was very taken positively by the students and would not have really occurred without the pandemic, actually, because it would have cost too much. So these are just some of the feedback of the students from the American Degree Transfer Program, how it was eye-opening, it provided content. It also provided a lot of the social aspect and cultural aspects to it as well. The other issue we had was also with internships to complete their graduation. But however, we managed to find there are a lot of organizations online who also had to revert. And this was a great opportunity for our psychology major students with the International Association of Counseling, which is a non-government organization. So they managed to work with them on the world mapping for counseling professions. And they were able to engage in research work, community, complete their reports, and organize a symposium as well. So there are a lot of all these organizations available. So as they say, Maslow, before Bloom, you have to take care of students' well-being. That was the biggest challenge as well, because the university is a realm where the most socializing happens. You develop contacts, you build connections. So that was one of the challenges that we had. But we've got a vibrant student council who initiated activities. They even had a playlist, to bring people together on Spotify. We've celebrated our 25th anniversary. So the program is 25 years old, and managed to get alumni from about 15 countries to join in, which may not have been possible before, but these are some of the real challenges. So if I leave you with three main ideas of some of the best practices and the way it's really going to move forward, is one thing that we noticed is industry collaboration. It also narrows the gap for employability. We managed to bring in the Malaysian Stock Exchange, bring in banks, bring in ICT companies, Snapchat, things like that, where we could bring in their expertise at a much easier way. And this is going to be, I think, a trend that we're going to see post-COVID as well. University transformation, I think the whole concept of university is going to change. It's not going to be so much for lectures and all, but more of a place for collaboration, project work, where the thinking takes place, and very immersive pedagogies. And also, I think we cannot deny, with digitalization, education has always grown together at tandem with technology. How we've moved from the OHP to the whiteboard to online, education always keeps pace to that. So hybrid learning will be for a while, especially with different borders being closed at different times. So I think as we move along, post-COVID or even towards an endemic, these are some of the changes that will continue to exist. And I've also put in a little link here at the bottom, which is a paper that was just published as well on what countries can do from country to country to get back to some normalcy. Thank you. And if you have any questions, you can always just drop me an email. Thanks, Judith.
Ms. Prema, thank you so much. Dear participants, just a gentle reminder to please keep your microphones muted throughout the speeches and the presentations. And there will definitely be a question and answer session towards the end of this webinar, yeah? All right. So now, with that, we are going to move to our next speaker. We are privileged to have Mr. Wang Yong, Executive Deputy Chair of Chongqing Council on International Education and Global Affairs, a new think tank based in the central city of West China to promote international peace and global development through education. Mr. Wang obtained his PhD in International Relations from China Foreign Affairs University in 2009. He was the visiting researcher at Georgetown University School of Foreign Service from August 2007 to August 2018. His research interest is American Studies, International Education, and International Relations. Welcome, Mr. Huang, and the platform is yours. Mr. Wang, you're muted.
Thank you, Judy. Thank you for introduction. Let me share my PowerPoint. Hello. Good evening from China, and it's a great pleasure to meet friends from all over the world, especially from Southeast Asia. And I'll be happy to share my perspectives on the higher education during the COVID-19 pandemic. And I want to share, how this pandemic was dealt with by Chinese universities, and I will share with you the best practices. I think. Okay, and as Prema did with her first slide, I want to share with you, the current COVID situation in China. Generally speaking, currently, the Delta variant has been controlled, and the Delta variant broke out in late July, in the middle of the summer holidays, and that's end of July. We canceled many field trips, but until now, about more than a month later, the variant has been controlled, and new cases are imported in, and the indigenous new cases turns to 0 per day, or 1 recently, and all Chinese universities will start the fall semester with in-person teaching and learning, and with very carefully designed prevention plan. But in-person teaching and learning will be conducted this fall, and the Chinese universities opened. Most of the Chinese universities opened the fall semester, and they are preparing for the welcoming the new students, the cohort of 2021, and this is the pandemic broke out unexpectedly, and so immediately after the pandemic, at the very beginning, we call it the epidemic, and the epidemic broke out, in China in early 2020, and right after the Spring Festival. And at that time, students and teachers enjoying the family reunion. That's a very important, actually, traditional Chinese festival called Spring Festival. And so our life has been totally disturbed, totally disturbed by the pandemic. So how to deal with this, the COVID? And it's the first question for the students and for the Chinese universities. And at the very beginning, we started the online teaching and learning at the first half of the spring semester. The spring semester usually starts from late February, but from late February, we postponed. Most Chinese universities postponed the opening of the spring semester, and we postponed the start of the spring semester, 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and then the Chinese universities decide to open from March to provide the students the learning opportunities. And the first is delayed start of spring semester. And then from March, most Chinese universities started the online teaching and learning. Online teaching and learning was a new thing for Chinese universities and for Chinese schools. And we experienced a very difficult time because we had very limited idea on online teaching and learning, and also extra burden. We have to prepare our courses online and deliver our courses online. And students had to learn how to study online, how to conduct virtual study. And we worried about the learning outcome. And there were lots of discussion about the learning outcome of virtual teaching and learning. But gradually, and this online teaching and learning, this virtual teaching and learning greatly transformed the understanding of the Chinese people on virtual teaching and learning or webinars. I could clearly remember in September 2019, a professor from the University of Western Australia, and because we have, a joint college, a joint institute, or joint college with Southwest University has a joint college with the University of Western Australia. A professor of Western Australia visited Southwest University, and we talked with each other. We had a long discussion about why Chinese universities could not accept virtual teaching and learning, and they have, Chinese people had, a negative attitude towards virtual teaching and learning, and we decided to do a joint research on the reasons. But after the pandemic, in April or May 2020, I emailed him again and telling him, hey, what is happening now? You can see the great transformation on the perception of virtual teaching and learning among Chinese students, among Chinese professors, and even Chinese, education authorities. This is a outcome of the a byproduct of the pandemic, and that's a very important change in China. And after from May 2020 to July, and we most Chinese universities, or almost most Chinese universities conducted online teaching and learning and in-person teaching and learning, except a few universities in Hubei province, from the except the few universities, almost most universities studied in-person teaching and learning and online teaching and learning at the same time. And students, campus reopened step by step, very carefully and very slowly since May 2020. And the university students could come back to campus, and the professors could teach either online or in person. And some professors choose to teach in person because they had been tired of virtual teaching, but most, I think about 70% of young professors, choose to the continuation of online teaching and learning, both to the students already came back and the students who are at home, and academic activities were conducted online because no large scale gathering, no academic conferences or in-person academic conferences, and most academic activities were conducted online, and the webinar became very popular in China. There's a software which is very professional, which is very, very popular in China, and not Zoom meeting, but Tencent meeting, or Volvo. I don't know whether you heard that or not. The international edition or international version of Tencent meeting is VOOV, VOOV meeting. it's a very very good software to connect the Chinese academia or Chinese students and Chinese professors. You can have a try. VOOV, VOOV. And I think academic engagement, began to increase among Chinese scholars because webinar became popular in China. And from this time last year, September 2020, and all Chinese universities started in-person teaching and learning, and we witnessed the normalization of COVID control and prevention. This is the daily task of the university, or to conduct. This is a normalization of COVID control and prevention. The daily task or daily work, and the normalization of university life. And we have to students and teachers and all visitors can enter the campus after identity and body temperature checking, and the students and teachers are required to do a daily report of their health education conditions, and international students is a special group, and international students continued with online teaching and learning, and so for the domestic, for the Chinese students or international students who are in China, at that time, they do the in-person, and for the international students who are abroad at that time, they continue with the online teaching and learning. And yes, with time, as time went on, you feel okay that the pandemic has gone. Sometimes you feel life had remained to normal, and until the breakout of Delta variant. And sometimes I emailed my friends and share with them the life and the university life here, and I often used almost back to normal. And best practices under the pandemic, I think the first practice, I think which is very important to share, is universities putting the pandemic control and prevention first. And this is the daily work, and the priority, and they enforce mask wearing in large gathering when necessary, and speed up vaccination. For all the faculties and the students, whose health conditions allow. This is one practice, and the Chinese universities are very, they sharing the responsibility of pandemic control and prevention. Each university is responsible for its own pandemic control and prevention, and they follow the instructions from Chinese CDC. And the second practice, I think, is actively continue and promote international exchanges and cooperation, and to keep keep the door open to the outside world. And this is from in the national level, there are many policies, and national policy, and local government and the university levels, and assured that the open door of Chinese education. And the China Scholarship Council, CSC, provide continued scholarship to international students who are willing to study in China, and continue to provide a scholarship to Chinese students and Chinese scholars who wants to study abroad. As far as I know, hey.
You have another 2 more minutes.
Oh, okay, thank you. Yeah, yeah, I will be there. Yeah, and continue the international culture programs, and currently online, and also design new international programs. For my part, actually, I designed several international programs during the during the past year. And for Southwest University students to the University of Athens, we continued our exchange program with the University of Athens. And next practice is establish learning centers in China for overseas students. This is an invention, under the pandemic, to provide, these learning spaces, learning services, learning resources like co-teacher, like library, and learning atmosphere to Chinese students enrolled by foreign institutions because they could not go abroad. And also with the learning center and overseas university open learning center in China. With the learning center, overseas universities could keep the Chinese students market and promote existence and reputation in China. For example, University of West Australia, University of Tasmania, and UTS, University of Auckland, and the universities of Syracuse all opened the learning center in Southwest China, with the cooperation with the Southwest University in Chongqing. And also encouraging Chinese universities directly enroll students with offers from overseas universities and recognize students' credits from overseas universities. And China has many Sino-foreign joint universities. I think it's 5. NYU has a campus in Shanghai, and Duke University, and University of Liverpool, and Nottingham. And Chinese authorities encourage the joint universities to open their campus to the students, to the Chinese students, and also joint programs. China has, I think more than 1,000 joint programs. They should open them to the Chinese students. This is, I want to share with you. Thank you very much. And this is my email, wangyunhoya@gmail. And please feel free to ask me any questions. Thank you, Judith. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. Wang. We are also fortunate to have our third speaker for the day, Dr. Timo Martikainen, a lecturer at the Teacher Training School and Research Associate of Department of Applied Educational Sciences and Teacher Education, University of Eastern Finland. Dr. Timo received his Master of Arts in Education from the University of Reykjavik, Finland, and began his career as a teacher. Then in 2002, he was appointed as a lecturer in the University of Eastern Finland's Teacher Training School. His area of research surrounds teachers, student teachers, and teacher education. His interests also lie in professional growth and education, interpersonal and interpersonal development, changes in society, and education in transformative processes. Dr. Timo, welcome, and the platform is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon from Finland. I'm a teacher educator in the University of Eastern Finland, and we live in a country of 5 million, and now 70% of us is vaccinated against COVID. However, every day there are about 500 new infections. Now we have over 100 infections altogether. So the situation with COVID is not over.
Dr. Timo, I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but your line is breaking.
Oh, I'm sorry about that. I don't know if you hear me now.
I think it's the same. Yeah, it's like, yeah. Could it be the headset?
So I try now to show my presentation.
Or maybe you can turn off your video, yeah, for the presentation. Maybe that would be a little bit better.
So can you see my presentation? The slideshow.
No.
Can you see my
no,
slide?
no, Dr. Timo.
How about now?
Yeah. Yes. All right.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
So we have a lot of changes in higher education at University of Eastern Finland, and I have gathered some information about that in June 2021. The rapid transition to distant learning due to corona pandemic has been difficult for teachers and students, and the transition from traditional teaching to multimodal teaching and digital pedagogy is still ongoing. The adoption of technology in teaching has caused great difficulties for some teachers, which has, for example, caused quality difference between quality differences. In academic life, the adoption of new teaching methods has taken the time of many university lecturers, during which time to research may also have suffered. There have certainly been challenges in finding time for research. My university has responded to this transition phase by, among other things, hiring teachers as peer support and over 40 students as teaching assistants for teachers, and this teaching assistant can work as an aid to either teaching or research, and they do lighter jobs than free up teacher time. Now there have been really permanent changes and will be in future in our teaching. It will be increasingly diverse and even multifaceted. For example, contact teaching, e-learning, electronic learning, and self-study combined. But that we think that there is no going back to the past. Efforts will be made to make full use of all these technological capabilities acquired during the corona period and to further develop them. For example, we have a so-called flipped learning strategy or method. Is one of new ways of learning in which the student goes through the theoretical teaching or background theory independently, and then the topic is deepened in contact teaching, for example, in groups. And now the perspective I want to maintain and emphasize is the students at risk from a social perspective. I mean social integration of students into the study community. And now we have the goal that most of teaching would be in contact for first year students when they start studies. So we think that it's very important that there are not so much distance teaching. Of course, we have to support our students in their professional practice. For example, teaching practice and medical practice, these cannot be done remotely. So we need the context, and we want to arrange it. Have been also some mental health issues reported by health officials. For example, students, they have suffered from boredom and loneliness. They can be in foreign city, and they don't have familiar people there. It's a very difficult situation, and health officials, they report increased depression, anxiety, and even eating disorders among students. Many challenges and in teaching methods, for example, correct sizing of tasks. It's the tasks delivered for students, they can grow too big and then too stressful. So the sizing of tasks is really important. And also the interaction with students, possibility to ask questions during lectures by email and so on. Students will need it more and more, and to also to handle uncertainty. Even near future is impossible to predict. The epidemic situation is a little bit worse now.
Dr. Timur?
By the way, there is an guess that the digitalization of teaching is a long-term investment of up to 10 million euros for universities and colleges in Finland. Actually, from a teaching perspective, here are three important points I want to share with you about teaching. Just this kind of universal and very general points. We as teachers, we must really think the content we offer for our learners. It must be suitable. The knowledge must be framed and illustrated illustrated to support learners to find meaningfulness of the content under study. This is possible to implement in distance teaching via ICT. There are many video negotiation softwares and other computer-based solutions to this kind of basic instruction by teacher and their this kind of basic instruction by teacher and their use have really increased a lot during COVID crisis. Then the teacher's guidance and feedback is needed in process of teaching, studying, and learning. Social interaction is crucial in human learning and development. During COVID crisis, this has been difficult to maintain. Individual guidance and feedback has delayed. This solution takes time and sets challenge to plan and the timetable, as well as to manage interaction via ICT tools. Many teachers do not have very large ICT abilities to this kind of teaching, so continuing education here is very important for teachers. Third point is about learners' motivation and meaningful study. It must be supported. Learner needs mastery experiences. They should feel that I'm learning, I'm going forward, I'm developing, and continues gaining knowledge and skills step by step in supportive learning environment. In different knowledge areas, this of course this vary. The more study object is a practical or specific art, the more difficult this is to manage for teacher, especially in distant teaching, studying and learning environments. Learner needs as well emotional support in individual survival of learning challenges, encouragement and empathy in talking about different feelings arise during the ongoing studies. ICT experiences of learners, so distance teaching easily has roadblocks on the way of mastery experiences and emotional support in distant type of computer-based teaching. Students have many times lack of learning skills and self-regulative ability in individual isolation caused by COVID crisis.
Dr. Timo, you have 1 more minute, yeah?
Thank you. Well, I look at these points based on research in social cognitive aspects in teaching, studying, learning process in educational settings. Human learning and development is continuous. Personal transformation in meaningful intrapersonal and interpersonal processes. Well, good luck for all of us, and let's keep our students. Let's take care of them, and let's take care of us too. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Timo. To the participants, we were very sorry that there were sound interruptions. Yeah. Okay, we are delighted to have our following speaker, Professor Dr. Faisal KP, Director and Assistant Professor of Sociology at Aligarh Muslim University, Malappuram Center, India. Professor Dr. Faisal has also worked in the Department of Sociology at Delhi School of Economics at Delhi University and Department of Sociology at Jamia Millia Islamia. His areas of interest include sociology of religion and culture and sociology of law and marginalized communities. His research work engages with the contemporary sociological and anthropological theories of religion and culture, social exclusion, and inclusive policies. Professor Dr. Faisal also served as founding director of the academic publishing firm, namely Book Plus Publication. He also works as the associate editor of the international journal, namely The Insight, published by Darul Huda Islamic University. He has worked as a sub-editor for Newslink Services, New Delhi, and editor in charge for Telegram Monthly. Welcome, and the time is yours, Professor Dr. Faisal.
Good evening, all.
Good evening.
I'm Dr. Faisal Kepi from Kerala, India. Am I audible? But I find some difficulties in sharing my slides. Let me share my slides first.
Sure.
Is it visible?
Yes, it is, Dr. Faisal.
So I'm here to present small presentations on the challenges and the best practices in higher education in India. So let me first take you to the COVID situations in the country. That first India the first COVID case was reported on 30th January 2020 in southern state of India, that is my own state. And then later on it was reported from other parts of the country. Then it spreads in several states of the country. And as of last month report, 30th August 2021, there were confirmed cases of COVID 3,28,57,937. Similarly, the death cases are reported and correlating to how the higher education institutions also responded to the situations. Now, government responded in different manners. So first step that government has taken was its immediate lockdown. It announced a nationwide lockdown and restricted movement of the people on from 24th March 2020. And it also started a massive campaign to break the chain of transmission, which was a campaign of kind of awareness program, hand hygiene, respiratory hygiene, use of masks, social distancing, quarantine of contact. So this was the second major response. The third major response was categorization of the district or regions which were affected by the COVID in terms of the number of cases. It was categorized into red zone, orange zones, and green zone. And in all these three different zones, there were different types of restrictions of the movement and activities. And then fourth major responses of the government was in terms of vaccinations as taking place in all the parts of the world. So as of 30th August, means last month, 2021, a total of 65 crore 20 lakh 14,767 vaccine doses have been administered. So all in on all the funds the government has been doing, whatever possible from the part of the government. But in terms of this lockdown and all other responses, how it sent a kind of shock and created a shock and among the people. They see the images how the immediate lockdown, how it was it created panic and chaotic situations among the people. So there were actually, there are more than 140 crores of people are there in the country, and people are migrating different parts of the country. So once the government announced the nationwide lockdown, people were not prepared for this kind of lockdown. And people desperately looking to migrate, to flee from the towns to their own villages. So all these figures and images are showing that aspect. And then not only while dealing with this kind of lockdown situation, but also while facing the death cases, also there were lots of chaotic situation in the country. See, especially in the second wave of the COVID, see the first and second photos, they also showing that the mass funeral prayers. See, you cannot even imagine how people actually desperately looking for a kind of, even for burial also, they were looking desperately for a chance, and many people were not even properly buried also, or that last rituals were not performed well. This third also, it shows that kind of participating in a burial and how they are actually wearing masks and different kind of social distancing. And the fourth image is again a very one of the shocking images that was reported from India, that is bodies of the deceased buried under the sand during the second wave of COVID-19 pandemic. At the bank of Ganga River in UP, it was actually satellite image where actually hundreds of people who died due to COVID, actually they're buried under sands. Now, how the COVID situations and how the responses of higher educations. See, soon after this lockdown announced by the government, all these apex education bodies also issued COVID-19 specific guidelines for Indian higher education institutions. So, you know that there are more than 1,000 universities and more than 40,000 colleges in India. They were all temporarily closed. It was announced temporarily closed, but now even till now they are not open. And the students asked to go home. Now, so this, this problem of COVID, we have to understand in the context of the entire higher education scenario of the country. So India has over 51,000 higher education institutions, including both, as just given the figures, and also an estimated 37.4 million students are studying in Indian higher education institutions. So these population are not a homogeneous population; these heterogeneous populations. They belong to different castes, class, communities, and coming scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, and marginalized, and the OBC or other backward communities and all. So the diverse demographics of the country we have to understand while looking at the COVID and its aftermath, how it's impacted the higher education of the country. And also one more aspect while considering the higher educations, that is rural-urban divide in the country. 394 universities of the country and 60.53% of the colleges are located in rural areas. And several million students hail from remote rural areas with minimal access to electronic devices and also reliable internet connectivity or state electricity supply. That is why they were also having lots of we need to understand how this the societies, how the students might have responded to the kind of aftermath of the COVID situations in the country. So obviously there is a huge digital divide that are giving us a kind of figures to understand the digital divide in the country. So access to computer as per the recent survey, so rural India having only 4.4% of the household is having access to computer, while urban India is having access to only for 23.4% of urban population having access to computer, while access to internet, rural population having only 14% of the rural populations having access to internet, while urban population 42% of having access to internet. You see, while looking at how people know using the computer, that is also very interesting because it has it was reported recently. That is the rural population, people aged 5 plus age above, then only for 9.9, less than 10% of them know how to use computer. In the urban population, it is just bigger, means 32.4% of the people know how to use computer properly. Similarly, know how using internet also. In the rural area, it is 13%, while in urban area, 37% know how to use internet and all. So, now, looking from this perspective, we may look at how this lockdown and its impact on higher education in the country. So, so as I mentioned just now, that the government of India announced a kind of nationwide lockdown. It was in March. So, period from March to August is very crucial for Indian higher education sector. Time for holding final examination, entrance tests for admission to the new academic years. All these are happening during this March to August. So, it was very crucial for Indian engineering education. That was the 2020 it was all these sectors, that is new admissions, examinations, students internship, practical sessions, all were affected the first. So all these institutions were not prepared what to do now. That kind of situation was there. Now, while looking at analyzing all the situation till now, we know what are the impact that these COVID situations on this higher education in the country. So, mode of teaching, it shifted to online education. Just as reported, my friends here, they all have reported the same. And there's a huge transition to online educations. So, higher education is not yet open after March 2020, although there was some attempt in the March to reopen, but still after again the second wave, all these institutions were actually closed down. And The second major point of difficulty of impact of COVID was actually access. So impact of COVID on enrollment varies by region and income levels. So how people getting admissions, and not only getting admission to some schools or colleges or universities, but also in terms of accessing to resources. Also, there are lots of problems because many, as I reported, there are lots major parts of the higher education are in the rural area where mostly they are taught in regional languages, and while looking at the online teaching is concerned, there are the lack of online materials available in the regional languages online. And then also disruption of research and extension activities and widening inequality, just I explained this now, and international mobility. People from India migrate a lot for education purpose, but it was affected. And similarly, we are also getting some international students, it was also affected. And then major area impact was placement and employability of the students. Significant reductions of job opportunities has made the transition from higher education to the labor market very difficult in the country. We need to look at some kind of positive changes that took place in the Indian higher education system. So while responding to the COVID situations, Indian universities also displayed very kind of very drastic changes. How the way they have actually showed the adaptability and innovation in dealing with the pandemic is very extraordinary and unpredictable even. So they also tried to ensure academic continuity through online platform. It was not stopped, but actually somehow they managed the teaching and learning process is not stopped. It is they tried to ensure at least the activities are going on online. And there are lots of online platform, Google platform, Zoom, and all these. Actually, my colleagues actually just now explained the similar kind of platforms we are also using in India. So creating new learning opportunities and also knowledge creation through webinars. So the way we are doing here, and also across the country, it is happening. The number of webinars are happening even by different departments of same university. So it is kind of exposed in terms of knowledge disseminations are taking place. Launch of online and blended learning mode of degrees, access for students, communities to online MOOCs and resources, that is also increasing. And then to conclude this so the major aspect of this COVID in terms of with respect to higher education was moving digital and going online. Just after a week after the lockdown, we saw actually a digital footfall. It was reported digital footfalls were triple. Actually, people started looking to online resources and started using internet and all. So government's digital initiative like the SWAYAM, which was already there, it was there from since 2017. But this platform that is called SWAYAM, that is Steady Webs of Active Learning for Young Aspiring Minds, which provides an integrated platform for various online courses across education levels and subjects areas, including skill sector courses. So this very wonderful, very useful platform that was developed by Indian government, and also during this COVID, it has been serving the purpose of the dissemination of knowledge and also making availability of the teaching videos and also assignments and examinations, all these. So SWAYAM hosted about 22,000 complete courses, and then including teaching videos, weekly assignments and examinations and credit transfers. So very wonderful initiative from the part of government, though it initiated 2017, but now during this COVID, it has got much more popularity. Then towards the conclusion, I want to make this point that the COVID-19 was a wake-up call for higher education institutions in the country, in India. So as you know, this higher education in the country, it was very reluctant to adopt this blended mode of or adopting this technology and blended learning in higher education. But this COVID situation has forced a transition from conventional teaching model to one driven by technology. So that was one of the positive aspect of this COVID, aftermath of COVID. And that it also created space for more flexible learning possibilities. So earlier we were actually preoccupied with kind of what should be the teaching learning when they have very conventional methods, and also there was a certain expectation from the students and teachers, and all now this COVID situation and online platform are given very revolutionary perspective or approaches towards the learning teaching learning perspectives or aspects. And then also exposure to massive open online courses, edX, Coursera, etc., became very familiar. Earlier, it was not that much. People were not aware of this kind of international MOOCs platforms. Now it has become very familiar. People are, or mostly the faculty members are also making use of these platforms, and also exploring blended learning. So it was, as I just mentioned, there was a forced transmission rather. It was blended learning towards blended learning. And also the capacity building of staff and faculty. Loads of FDPs, that is faculty development programs, have been organized, conducted by different universities, and which were open to all the faculty members across the country. So my own university, even my own department and my own institutions, we have organized several FDPs, which were actually to educate the teachers how to use the modern these new technologies, using how to even we started how to use Zoom and Google Meet, then also how to develop Moodle and how to develop MOOC and all these kind of things, even at a very micro level. I myself experienced. So this is happening across the universe, again, all other parts of the country. Then this COVID-19, it was also kind of pressing the government and higher education for heavy investment technical infrastructure. So this was the one of the areas which was least addressed by the governments and higher education. So this COVID situation has opened the eyes of the administrations and the governments to be focusing on to invest more in technological infrastructures. And now finally, so it's called for a new approaches in learning assessment and examination to comply with online teaching and learning pedagogy. Since the teaching and learning has changed.
Dr. Faisal? Dr. Faisal? Okay, I think we may have lost connection with Dr. Faisal. All right, thank you so much, Dr. Thank you so much, Dr. Faisal. I think we will move to our next speaker. Our next speaker, we are privileged to have Professor Dr. Andre Luiz Prudencio Sena from Rio de Janeiro State University, Brazil. His area of expertise lies in developing research on the most diverse topics related to history, with varied interests in political studies, international relations, and Canadian history. At present, he researches the recent diplomatic relations between Brazil and Canada. He recently edited the book International Relations in a Post-Pandemic World, launched in Portugal. This book gathers researchers from Brazil, China, and Africa discussing the changes that the international system will endure after the current pandemic. Professor Dr. Andre, welcome, and the platform is yours.
Thank you, Judith. Good morning, everyone. It is a pleasure to be here with you. And thank you for all the students that have registered in this wonderful webinar. And also thank you all my colleagues and institutions that are involved in the organization of this wonderful event. I'm going to share my screen and discuss a few ideas with you. Just a second. I hope it's visible now.
Yes, it is.
All right. So I think for us to discuss Brazil, the first thing that we have to do is to have a look a little bit of the Brazilian domestic situation right now. Politics has been playing a very, very important role in the Brazilian domestic atmosphere since 2001. So we have been, since 2001, experiencing a polarization in Brazil that has been escalating like every 3-4 years since 2001. In 2014, that political situation and that political polarization between the right and the left have escalated even more, leading to a certain reaction of a huge part of the Brazilian conservative society that elected in 2018 a right wing, or I would even say a far right wing president, Jair Bolsonaro. So this happened in 2018. Bolsonaro was sworn in 2019, and in March 2020 we had COVID. So COVID happened in Brazil at the same time where this political polarization had taken place, and also with the election of a very controversial and right wing conservative president. So COVID 19 has been also dragged into that political Brazilian situation. So one of the things that we can experience in Brazil since that we have been experiencing in Brazil since 2020 is the politicization of the pandemic. So we have the pandemic as a health problem, as a major issue, but we also have not only from the government, but inside the Brazilian society itself, a political debate, and not a health debate, but a political debate about the pandemic. So in this image, for instance, you are seeing the Brazilian flag, and the blue part of the flag has turned into a COVID-19 virus, and it's heading toward the Brazilian president. And you also see military figures in this image trying to escape the virus that is heading straight toward the president. These military figures represent not only the military past that Brazilian had when we had a dictatorship between 1964 and 1985, but also all the military ministers that the President Bolsonaro brought back into the government. So we have a right-wing government that is supported, very much supported by a great deal of the Brazilian society, not by all of it, but by a great deal of it. And at the same time, we have the same government having a political interpretation of the pandemic. So I'm going to give you two examples of this political interpretation. The first one is that the pandemic was a hoax, was a scam, that there was not a pandemic, that this was invented by China, for instance. This is a very undiplomatic and very gross interpretation of the pandemic that came from the government itself. Back then, in 2020, we had a foreign minister in Brazil, a chancellor, that declared publicly that the virus, the COVID-19 virus, was a communist virus. So there is a very serious confusion between the pandemic itself, which is a public health issue, a public health problem, and a political interpretation of that pandemic. And all of that has jeopardized the social atmosphere, the social relations in Brazil, and that has affected not only the social tissue altogether, but it has also taken a toll on our universities. So here you see Bolsonaro, the president, and right under it, the Supreme Court that is trying to oppose him right now in the country. And in 2022, we have presidential elections. And the figure that I'm pointing with my mouse here, the last one, is the representative of the left, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, which was the former Brazilian president, a left-wing politician that is trying to oppose Bolsonaro as much as he can and will try to win the elections in 2022. So we have a right-wing negationist government, a president that at first tried to deny the pandemic. We have a Brazilian diplomacy that said that the pandemic was a hoax, was a scam, and that the virus was a communist virus. And we have the left trying to come back to power in Brazil. So that political atmosphere has compromised immensely the fight against the virus in Brazil. And that led to that situation that you are going to see now. So this is the current situation in Brazil. You can see that we have almost more than 500,000 dead people in the country and 21 million confirmed cases in the country. That situation is a very serious one, and one of the causes of it was the politicization of the pandemic and not facing the pandemic as a public health problem. So the mixture between politics and a health issue has caused these numbers that you are seeing now. And a curiosity that I can point out to you, you can see that this data, this information is from Johns Hopkins University. Why am I presenting data from Johns Hopkins University? Because due to the problems, to the political problems in Brazil, and to the instability of the government towards the pandemic, we cannot rely in the data that is produced by the government itself. There is a lot of under notification in Brazil, so we cannot rely on that data. The data from the government have lost credibility since the day one of the pandemic. So to really know what's happening in the country, we have to go to more trustable platforms like the Johns Hopkins University that you are seeing now. So you can see that the situation is pretty bad, pretty serious, and one of the causes of that situation now is the politicization of the pandemic that has affected the whole population, but that has also taken a toll on our universities, especially in Rio de Janeiro's context. That is the context where I used to teach when I lived in Brazil until 2019. I do not live in Brazil anymore. I am a self-exiled professor in Toronto. So until 2019, I used it to teach there personally, in person. But the pandemic, ironically, has allowed me to continue to teach from a distance from Toronto to Brazil. And this is what I'm going to show you now. So here you can see I'm not teaching in person anymore, but I'm still very much connected to my former colleges, to my former universities, to my former places of work. The only college that I work with now is the last one that you've seen here. I don't know if you can see my mouse pointing out. Can you? I think you can. The last image, Descomplica, is the biggest education online, the biggest online education startup in Brazil now. And they hired me here in Toronto, so I work remotely for this college now. But I used to work for these two ones here, the University of Veiga de Almeida and IBMR. And I still have strong connections, moral connections and volunteering connections to them during the pandemic. And here you can see an example of a webinar that I have been participating with them. This is the International Relations Week project, the image you are seeing now. From these three universities that you can see in the right part of the slide, the University of the Middle, IBMR, was one of the first ones in Brazil to really promote what we call today international education. Brazil has been a very isolated country, academically speaking. It's a tradition in Brazil to close itself. And international education is something quite recent for our students in Brazil. So IBMR, where I used to work for years and years, was one of the colleges that started in the country to open the possibilities to our students to connect worldwide. And this was way before the pandemic. So I had, as a professor with this institution, IBMR, some experience with connecting worldwide, talking to international students and promoting international education. On the top, you can see the UVA University, Universidade Veiga de Almeida, that has been doing a tremendous job in terms of online or remote education, or what Professor Prema said before, a COVID or pandemic pedagogy. UVA has been doing a lot of things, including this webinar that you are seeing now with my slide, but they also create something very interesting. They had it before, but they boosted it after the pandemic, which is a university TV channel. So they improved the TV channel that they had before the pandemic. And now one of the main possibilities of sharing knowledge, communicating nationally, because UVA is not just a university that is based in Rio, it's based in Rio, but it reaches the whole population of the country because they have online education too. So the TV channel, which is called TV UVA, is doing a tremendous job in terms of sharing knowledge and giving not only academic entertainment in terms of researches, new subjects, new topics, but also using the TV channel as a tool to widespread knowledge and discussions. So that's a very interesting thing that I would like to point out too. So let's go to the next slide. So personally, during the pandemic, I've been reaching out some colleagues of mine, and I have been doing myself something that I called
Professor Dr. Andre, I'm so sorry. You just have another 2 more minutes, yeah?
Okay, a public history initiative. So I have been doing with some freely and voluntarily for my students in Brazil and also for the general public, all sorts of Instagram lives, especially using the Instagram, StreamYard, Facebook, and Google Meet platforms, talking about my field of research, which is international relations. So recently I have been talking about Afghanistan. We are going to celebrate our 199 Independence Day on September the 7th. There's going to be a huge protest in Brazil, a very polarized protest in Brazil. So I'm doing an Instagram live about that too. I have been invited by the National Library of Brazil remotely to talk about the independence history. Also, the Canadian television. I've been doing a work with the a Canadian TV channel here in Toronto that is aimed at the Portuguese speaker community here in the city. So I've been talking about international relations, the pandemic, Afghanistan, and also some collaborations with my colleagues, with the professors, not only with the students. I have launched very recently, as Judith said when she presented me, a book it's on Amazon, so you can download it, and I think you can download it for free if you want, called International Relations in a Post-Pandemic World. And you're going to hear soon Professor Paulo Maumane that it's going to talk to you soon. He also participated in that with me. So thinking the pandemic through is very important. And also international education is also collaboration, academic collaboration with your colleagues, with your peers. And but what are we hearing from our students about these times? Very quickly, Judith, I promise you, I put 3 images there. Our students in Rio especially are complaining a lot about stress, mental health problems, panic, but they are also saying, and this you can see in the second image, that the chores and the assignments are being much more harder to accomplish. That's another thing. But they are also saying that thanks to the pandemic, we can finally connect more with international students all around the world. So I'll leave you a question before I finish for us to discuss. In a normal scenario, which of these educational practices will remain on the ground and which ones are probably vanishing for good? So thank you for your attention. Judith, sorry to overspeak. And if you have any questions, you can email me or add me on my Instagram account. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you so much, Professor Dr. Andre.
Thank you.
We are honored to have our next speaker, Dr. Alexandra Anastasia Do, an educational coordinator for teachers of English in the Regional Directorate of Education for Central Macedonia and tutor in the postgraduate program at Hellenic Open University, Greece. Dr. Alexandra holds a Bachelor of Arts in English Language and Literature from Aristotle University, a Master in Education in TESOL from Hellenic Open University, a Master in Arts in Cognitive Development from the Pedagogical Department of Western Macedonia, a PhD in Teaching Writing from Aristotle University, and a postdoc from the Pedagogical Department of Western Macedonia, Greece. Her research interests include teaching writing, teaching young learners, curriculum design, teaching English as a foreign or international language, teacher training, content and language integrated learning, and critical literacy. Dr. Alexandra, welcome, and the time is yours.
Thank you very much. I will try to share my, okay. So, is it all right?
Yes, it is.
So, teaching and tertiary education during COVID-19, the case of the Hellenic Open University, Greece. My co-presenters presented very nice facts. They talked about statistics. Andrea talked about the political aspect. I'm going to focus on something different. First of all, we're going to present tertiary education in Greece. The conventional universities before the pandemic offered face-to-face teaching, including lectures and tutorials, workshops, and internship. But during COVID-19, they had to resort to distance learning using various platforms like Zoom, Teams, and Moodle. We have done some research and found out studies concerning the consequences of the pandemic on professors and the students. Camille, in a recent study in the University of Piraeus, focused on professors' views who acknowledged the advantages of distance learning. They said that they got familiar with ICT and the students' performance did not deteriorate. But there were also some disadvantages. Some teachers said that they had limited knowledge, and this limited knowledge made them feel insecure about their teaching practices. Sometimes there was poor internet connection, and in some departments there was outdated technological infrastructure. The most important finding was that students got socially alienated, and Camille concluded that limited research has been carried out so far. Then Zara, again in the University of Piraeus, but in a different department, explored students' views who acknowledge that e-learning is not more time-consuming than the traditional one. They did not get high grades during e-learning. The digital platform that their university used is quite user-friendly. They are familiar with ICT, which is more than normal, as they are considered to be digital natives, and they acknowledge the help of the administrative authorities of their university. Zganzi focused on a different issue, that is the students' view on the psychological consequences of COVID. She administered questionnaires to students of music and art at the University of Macedonia, Thessaloniki, and they revealed that there were negative repercussions on students' psychology, and some of them even said that they felt depression. In the same line, the teacher's psychological condition was negatively influenced, but to a lesser degree. On the other hand, some good points also arose. That is, the students said that they exploited the potential of technology to keep in touch with their audience, and they took part in various events during the lockdown. Another important last one here, study concerned senior secondary education, students from an experimental school, and we chose this study because they are going to enter university next year. So they acknowledge that the face-to-face learning is superior to synchronous distance education because they feel that there is a significant decline in concentration in online classes. The lack of immediate supervision from their teachers influences the general quality of their classes. Active participation is far more convenient in the classroom. The lack of visual contact between them and their teachers is the main reason for classroom superiority. And finally, they acknowledge that their teachers tried very hard, and their performance was similar to the ones from face-to-face classes. This research was carried out by Macedonia Center. So far, we tried to present conventional universities. Now I'm going to focus on our own university, which, as its name implies, it is an open university, Hellenic Open University. When we read Open University, it implies that this is a distance learning of a university. So it is mainly distance learning, and I'm going to give a few, information about our program. The layout of our master's education in teaching English as a foreign international language. Before the pandemic, two parallel programs coexist. An annual one, which includes 6 modules and a dissertation, written assignments, 5 face-to-face contact sessions, 4 phone sessions, and face-to-face written exams. So even in a distance learning program, we had face-to-face meetings and exams. In the last 2 years, a new program was created. We offered the same materials, but in semesters. The students had 3 contact sessions per year, mainly face-to-face or online, and there were telephone, email, and teleconferencing sessions. As distance learning is quite different from the traditional and conventional one, our former students expressed their difficulties. Some of them said that it is difficult to organize their time and to organize their study skills. Other students said that they found reading quite overwhelming. You know, they have to organize their studying and their progress at their own pace, and they have to find their own pace and organize their own study skills. And what is very encouraging is that some students acknowledge receiving constructive feedback from their tutors. Now, some more things about distance learning methodology in general. In distance learning universities, it helps students reflect upon and write down their own experience, which promotes metalinguistic and metacognitive consciousness. There are educational activities in our materials and self-assessment questions, which help students to familiarize themselves with the material, analyze what they have read so far, develop critical thinking, evaluate what they read, make predictions about the content which is going to follow, and finally confirm whether the predictions were right or wrong. And what are the challenges of distant learning? In distant learning, the relationships of between students and tutors and students themselves must be more intimate. Students need to interact with each other, but because everyone is alone and they work alone, so they have to find a way to interact. Students should organize their study time according to their own pace and interests and commitments. They are strongly advised to attend all contact sessions and phone sessions. Extra reading resources are provided to them, networking is encouraged, and they practically organize and reorganize their skills. Okay. Some tips on maximizing the materials, these materials in such a program. We mentioned that there are educational activities, which are some of them are optional and others are compulsory. There is a forum where the students interact. All students have access to the forum. There are tasks and the students provide answers which promote dialogue and foster group ethic. There is an answer key providing answers which are more food for thought. I would also like to present to you our journal, which is called Research Papers in Language Teaching and Learning. We encourage our students to publish their own research in this journal. And in the late years, we have been receiving a lot of papers internationally, and we publish them. Now, even though our institution is distant learning and all tutors have been trained to teach students from distance, the new reality has greatly affected us too. During the pandemic, everything was carried out through a computer. There were no face-to-face sessions and no face-to-face exams. So tutors and students felt isolated. Thus, more social groups have been formed, but they don't replace human relationships. We hope to get back to normality again, at least in our former situation. And strangely enough, even though we searched lots of research about conventional universities, it is normal that there was a shortage of studies concerning distant learning in universities, because this is their normal practice. I would like to thank Dr. Sefakis Nikos, professor at the Kapodistrian University of Athens and the director of our master's program, the Hellenic Open University, for providing us with the information about the layout of our master's program. Have a wonderful academic year. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Alexandra. Now, just a general information, as we are getting quite a number of questions in the chat, similar questions. I'd just like to
Can't listen to you very well, excuse me.
Thank you so much, Dr. Alexandra, for your presentation. So we will move on to the next part. Just a general information to our attendees. If anyone would like the slides of our presenters, please do email them to get the slides individually. They have disclosed their email addresses during their presentation, and they have also stated their email addresses in their chat. So if you would really like their slide presentation, then please do email them individually. Now, there are some questions with regards to e-certificates. Now, for e-certificates, we will send them to registered participants for the webinar. So I hope this question is being addressed for those who are unsure about it. Okay, now on to our next speaker. We are happy to have with us Dr. Rusdiana Junaid, Dean of Faculty of Teacher Training and Education, Universitas Chopra Minato, Palopo, Indonesia. Dr. Rusdiana got her Bachelor of Arts at Institute of Teacher Training and Education, Ujung Pandang in 1992, Magistra of Humaniora at Hasanuddin University, 1999, Diploma in TESOL 2005, and Master of Arts in Applied Linguistics 2006 at Curtin University of Technology, Western Australia, and Doctoral Program of Hasanuddin University 2012. She was lucky to have the opportunity for the short courses of sandwich program at Griffith University, Australia 2009, and short-term training on lesson study for the Institute of Teacher Training and Educational Personnel in Japan 2015. Her research interest includes teaching and learning strategies, cultural studies, and lesson study. Dr. Rusdiana, welcome, and the platform is yours.
Well, thank you, Judith. Hold on, I will share my screen. Hold on. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, whichever suits your time. Okay. Thank you very much for the time given to me to share issues on higher education during the COVID-19 pandemic, global perspective of the challenges and best practices in Indonesia. Well, as I was introduced just now, I'm from Universitas of Chopra Minato Palopo. Well, in relation to the topic, I will share and discuss about current COVID-19 status in Indonesia. And then the second one is challenges faced in education sector. And then the third one is best practices. Well, I will start with the current COVID status in Indonesia by sharing the data that I got from COVID-19.go site. And then later on, I will show in more details. And one thing that I would like to show you is good news that if we have a closer look at the maps that I show you, the data that I took from on the 2nd of September compared to the data that I got on the 30th of August, it shows a significant decrease in relation to risk zonation area. So we can see here, there are still many high risk area, and then it is decreased significantly 3 days later. Well, here it is, the details that the current COVID in Indonesia, the data that I took on the 30th of August. We can see that there were more than 4 million infected, and then there were 3 million cured or recovered, and then died more than 100,000. So this is actually bad news or something like that. And then I will narrow it down to more specifically in each province. And the one that I highlight here is the data about COVID status in South Sulawesi or Sulawesi Selatan. But you can find the data on covid19.go.id if you want to see in more detail. Here, even in Palopo, they also, no exception was infected by the COVID-19, and we can see if we compare it with the national data, and then this one is in Palopo. But and then here is the data also. We can see daily progress, which one is confirmed and then recovered and then death. But luckily that nowadays it decreased significantly. And then we know that the COVID-19 affects or gives impacts in almost all aspects of life, something like economy, in social, culture, transportation, and no exception is in education. So I think this is a global pandemic, and all of us have, and this one has been going on for more than one and a half years, and the direct impact in education sector is the appeal of work from home, where the students learn or study from home, and the lecturer or the teachers teach from home. And this is one effort that the government do in order to prevent the spreading of the COVID-19. So work from home in education sector changed gradually the teaching and learning process from face-to-face interaction into online learning mode. Oh, sorry. Sorry. Okay. So, and the next issue that I would like to share is challenges faced in education sector during the pandemic outbreak. I know and I believe that actually there are many things as the challenges, but what I would like to share at this moment is I have jotted down 5 things. The first one is the internet access. Not all areas in Indonesia can access internet. So there are some areas where internet cannot be accessed. Later, I will show you some pictures that show that many students find it difficult, especially in remote areas. And then the second one is technology adaptability. So the fact shows that lecturers and students, some of the lecturers and students lack of computer skills. So in this case, of course, we have to, encourage our lecturers, encourage our students to improve their digital skills. And then the third one is lecturers and students' mindset on the learning process. So based on the survey that I did last semester, I found that many students said that face-to-face interaction in the teaching and learning process is much better than the online learning. They feel or they believe that the level of understanding the materials is much better if the teaching and learning process is carried out with face-to-face. Another issue in Indonesia is the internet data. I think this is financial issues. However, the government pay attention to this one because Ministry of Education provide students with data in order to be able to, to attend the teaching and learning process. Well, as I said just now, that internet is one of the challenges that Indonesian face. The data that I took from Tempo, it says that more than 12,000 villages cannot access internet. And then even not only in the remote areas, can access internet. So, but this is because the distribution is very difficult because Indonesia's territory is very wide and its geographical condition vary. So it is very difficult to cover the whole areas, especially the remote areas. In May, in June last year, even some students find it very hard to be able to join or to attend the lectures. So some students went to a high mountain, for example, and also they climbed the trees. You can see not only actually in Luwu, but not only in Luwu, because in other areas, for instance, in Kalimantan, also in some areas in Sumatra, in Papua, have the same problems. So, and then I said just now, another challenges is technology adaptability. I mean, both teachers and lecturers need to improve their computer skills. For example, if they have mobile also, some applications, maybe they find it difficult to use or to make use of the applications that are available on the mobile. So, and then the third issue just now is the teaching and learning process. The picture on the left is the teaching and learning situation before the pandemic or the outbreak of the COVID, and then because of the COVID, then it changed into online learning. So there are many platforms that the teacher or the lecturers can use. One of them is Zoom. Zoom is very popular in Indonesia. Maybe this is a bit quite different from the case in China, as Yong has explained just now. And then move to the best practices. Best practices, I think in Indonesia we have what we call SPADA, Sistem Pembelajaran Daring in Indonesia is equals to online learning. And then as I said just now, that last semester I did a small survey and I found that the students prefer or suggest that it is better if we carry out the teaching and learning process by using hybrid learning or blended learning, and therefore, especially in my institution, we have already prepared for these types of interaction. And then another one, I think this is very good, is collaboration with other universities and industries, nationally, both nationally and internationally. And then, as I said earlier, that one thing that we need to do is increase the lecturers' digital skills. Here it is, sistem pembelajaran daring or online learning. As I said, since last year, we have actually practiced online learning, but now become better because we use this in almost all the time. And then elements of online learning that we have to pay attention. There is curriculum, contents of the online, and then the process. I think the process just now include with the assessment, and then methods, software and hardware. This is also a challenging, actually is one of the challenges is the availability of the hardware, and then the media that we are going to use in order to, you know, in the teaching and learning process. And then network, I think this is one of the big problems where not all areas are covered with the network. And then another one is the infrastructure. There are some universities who cannot afford to provide an excellent or supportive infrastructure. And then LMS or learning management system, which massively introduced in almost all universities in Indonesia. And then another issue is the evaluation some people, lecturers find it difficult how to evaluate in order to get objective results, and then also the product. I think the same as the other countries, we use many kinds of teaching and learning platform, but I think I just want to take in the case of in my universities that most lecturers use Zoom and also Google Classroom. WhatsApp group, where through WhatsApp group they can record their voice, so voice notes, I mean. Also some lectures just use emails in order to send something like a student's assignments.
Dr. Rustiana just would like to keep time, so we another 2 more minutes.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Close, almost. Yeah, this is the last slide.
Thank you.
Okay, so as you can see, the online teaching and learning platform we use here, it depends on the lecturer's ability to use it, and also the ability of the students to afford the hardware. Okay, I think that's all my presentation. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, you can share it in the chat box. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rustiana. Maybe you would like to also put in your email address so that they will be able to get the slides from you. Thank you so much, Dr. Rustiana, again. We have come to our final speaker for the day. We are delighted to have with us Professor Paulo Malman, an Assistant Professor of Anthropology at Pedagogical University of Maputo, Mozambique. He has a master's degree in Ethnic and African Studies from the Federal University of Bahia, Brazil, and a degree in Anthropology from the Eduardo Mondlane University in Mozambique. Professor Paulo is also a PhD candidate currently in Cultural Anthropology at the Uppsala University in Sweden. Professor Paulo designed the anthropology curriculum and became the first director of the anthropology course with guidance in ethics studies at the Pedagogical University of Maputo in 2017. He is the author of An Anthropological Perspective on Political Behavior and Democratic Participation in Mozambique, and co-author of the book International Relations and in the Post-Pandemic World, Permanencies and Discontinuities, organized by Andre Sena and Caro Lucien Perez. Welcome, and the time is yours, Professor Paulo.
Thank you so much for this opportunity to share my experience about the pandemic of COVID in Mozambique. So let me share now my slides. I'm having difficult. So the presentation content of this is introduction, objective, COVID-19 current status in Mozambique, notes on higher education in Mozambique, responses of the higher education institutions to COVID-19 and good practices, challenges, and the final considerations. In March of 2020, the government of Mozambique decreed a state of emergency within the scope of COVID-19. The measure involved, among others, the closure of universities, prohibition of events with more than 20 people, limitation of informal trade activities, etc. The COVID-19 pandemic has aggravated social inequalities and the vulnerability for the most disadvantaged populations. In Mozambique, about 43,000 people lost jobs due to COVID-19. About 218,908 higher education students in the country were affected by the pandemic, with the suspension of class by Presidential Decree 11/2020 of 30 March. So in the introduction, higher education institutions in Mozambique were found by surprise and severely affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. The response to this unexpected crisis has been diverse. In order to respond to the suspension of classes, the higher education institution continued the teaching and the learning process using various technological tools. The objective of this presentation is to share the current COVID-19 status in the country, the best practice and challenges of higher education institutions in Mozambique, in the management of the teaching and learning process in the context of COVID-19. Current status in Mozambique of COVID-19. Mozambique is a southern African country, and according to data from the National Institute of Statistics, the country's current population is 18,832,244 inhabitants. Since the first case of COVID-19 broke out in March 2020, the Ministry of Health has been recording the case, and currently this presents as follows: 147,066 cases registered, 9,760 active cases, 135,481 fully recovered, 1,871 deaths, 6,807 hospitalized, 312 new infection. The data as of September 2, 2021. This is source of Ministry of Health of Mozambique. Notes on higher education in Mozambique. Mozambique currently has a student population of 218,918 higher education, divided in 49 higher education institutions, of which 9 are public universities, 5 are public institutions or higher schools, 4 are public polytechnic superior institutions, 3 are military higher education institutions, 28 are private higher education institutions. Response to COVID-19 and good practice. From March 23, 2020, there was an interruption of classroom classes, closed higher education institution, students at home, home teachers, uncertainty about how higher education institutions operate around the world, use of technological tools for teaching and learning, remote teaching, pedagogical management, and technological innovation. Production of instruments during the suspension period. There was an action plan led by the Eduardo Mondlane University for the prevention of COVID-19 in higher education institutions, a study on the use of technological tools for teaching and learning by students in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic, a study on the use of technological tools for teaching and learning by teachers in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic. There was a preparation for the return to classroom, a study of students' perception in relation to returning to in-person class, a solid waste management plan, cleaning and disinfection of space and surface for collective private use, and a conduct guide for coexistence in the prevention of COVID-19. Scenarios for a gradual and controlled return to school in the context of COVID-19 in public higher education institution in the south of Mozambique. Immediate actions implemented: hand washing related to water availability, disinfectants, regular cleaning and disinfection, waste management, physical distance, monitoring team, biosafety training, checklist, all became part of the hygiene culture in higher institution, in higher education institution of Mozambique. I bring here some higher education institution of south of Mozambique that implemented some activities. The activities were related with updates, the 2020 academic calendar, developed and publishing the class schedule comprising half of in-person class and the other half using digital platforms, schedule and train teachers and students on how they should behave on campus. Only the University Joaquim Chissano did not do this task. Relocation of classrooms according to schedule to be defined, organization of the rooms and put labels on the desk, ensuring that the rooms were arranged with a distance of 1.5 and 2 meters. The distribution of teachers across courses, only the University of South did not do this, and the redistribution of students by classroom, laboratory where applicable. This I found in the report of the Pedagogical Directorate of November 2020. So the response to COVID-19 in pedagogical scope, the teaching strategy consisted on remote teaching plus on-site teaching. Technological teaching and learning tools. The University of Eduardo Mondlane recommended the use of 4 technological tools for teaching and learning as Moodle, Zoom, Google Class, and Skype with respective tutorials and help desk service. The distributed 60 Zoom licenses to 17 faculties, schools, plus 14 other units. It established a support mechanism for the use of ICT for teaching and learning with focus on face-to-face teaching. It increased bandwidth for internet access on Maputo campus by an additional 1 Gbps. Challenges: ensure availability of products for regular disinfection. To strengthen monitoring mechanisms for the implementation of health and safety measures, train teachers and students in remote teaching models, ensure internet connectivity and electronic device for teachers and students. Final consideration, the COVID-19, it's a good opportunity to rethink and test our responsiveness in higher education here in Mozambique, improving teaching and learning conditions. The COVID-19 pandemic created as well opportunities for accelerated adoption of remote teaching and learning in Mozambique. There is a need to rethink the training of teachers for the future and adapt pedagogical practice in the context of COVID-19. The pandemic has shown that there is no single formula for responding, as it is an opportunity to learn from the challenges. The studies carried out mainly by the UWM University demonstrated challenge in relation to the use of technological tools for teaching and learning. A significant number of students and teachers do not participate in remote learning due to connectivity. There is a need for massive training of teachers and students in remote teaching models. The COVID-19 pandemic has demonstrated that the combination of remote and face-to-face learning is possible and it brings more benefits. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Professor Paulo. Just a minute, please. Okay, so that ends our session for our speakers, and we will now move on to our Q&A session. Thank you for staying on with us. If you have any questions for our speakers, please do state it in our chat box. I do see that some of the questions have been posed and our speakers have been responding towards them. Now, if you have any other questions that you would like to ask any of our speakers, then you may type them in the chat box and we will forward it to them. If you have a specific speaker in mind, please do state so. Yeah, so we'll just have probably another 10 minutes of question and answer before we move along. I see a hand raised by Asna Marzuki. Is there a question that you would like to ask? Ms. Asna? Okay, I guess our real time when the questions are coming up and our speakers were already responding to quite a lot of them, so I believe that the questions have been responded to. Yeah. Okay, I have there is one question. Now, during the post-pandemic time, or not post-pandemic time, during the pandemic time, we see that a lot of we see a lot of platforms that have been put up for students for support and counseling. Can any of our speakers share any platform that is been placed or part that has been placed for academicians, for them as an avenue for counseling or support purposes?
Professor Prema, you're muted.
Oh,
did you mute? It's okay. Yeah, thank you. So one thing that we are doing in Malaysia, for students, is we have a counseling unit within the university. So we have started a hotline for that and a WhatsApp number, so students can access our counselors at any point, different time zones. Whenever, there's always a counselor on duty to answer them, or even make an online call like this. The other thing for staff as well that we have in place is, as part of our medical coverage, besides health, psychological and counseling as well is included. So if you have to go and see a therapist or a counselor, it is also covered by the university, by our medical coverage. So these are two areas that we have. And of course, for staff, the university counselors as well are open. So these are two ways for students and for staff that we have expanded it.
Thank you so much, Ms. Prema, for sharing that with us.
Well, in Brazil, we at the universities where I taught, we have also psychological services available. to the students, what we call brief therapy, in terms of when in cases of panic or stress. And there is also a hotline between the students and the coordinator of the courses. So they have direct access to their main coordinators. But you know, we are living in a pandemic and in an international environment of communication. So our students, I'm sure all my colleagues will share the same experience. Our students, they reach us through social media too. So they talk to us mainly all the time.
Thank you so much, Professor. Andre?
And I think we are also currently like the frontliners in a way with our students, because we are accessible 24 hours a day. I mean, compared to before, where when you leave campus or you leave your workplace and that's it till the next day. But now, with the handphone and WhatsApp groups and things like that, and the different students in their own home countries all over the world in different time zones, we're 24 hours on call, I think, as academics.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Ms.
Which is another very important issue as it leads to teachers' burnout.
Yeah.
It's explored, and
yeah,
it is very, they feel frustrated, teachers feel frustrated, they feel they can't cope with all this stress.
Yeah, I do agree, Dr.
And
Alexandra.
maybe it's a very nice topic for a future webinar.
Coming soon. Okay, we have a question in the chat. What kinds of teacher training should be provided for the prospective teachers in order to meet these kinds of pandemic situation? That's a good question, because this one just came about and we all were a bit stuck for a moment. So, looking forward, what sort of a training should be given? Thank you, Nafu. Professor Faisal? Sorry, yeah. Yes, Professor Amber, go ahead.
Go ahead, Faisal.
Yeah.
You have to unmute yourself, Faisal.
Oh, no,
Oh.
Well, I think that prospective teachers should be taught about both modes of teaching, and they should be supported psychologically too. They need not only knowledge, but they need psychological support too, but because we're not psychologists, so we should foster empathy to try to get into one another's shoes and feel how our students feel and how we feel. And not only about distance learning, it's all this social distancing, all this lockdown for so much time, which has caused problems to all of us. We women even say, I've bought some dresses and I can't wear them.
Well, in Rio, there has been training before the pandemic because of online education itself. So I think what we should do is to improve and amplify the training that we already had before for online education, to add new tools, because the pandemic has new requests. But basically, we have been doing this before. So this international online education environment is not totally new to us. We have been doing something before, because our institutions in our countries have been working with online education before. So I think we should just improve what we already have and not start anew, but new practices have to be included. And we are going to find out which new practices are, but we have been doing some work before. That's my opinion.
Yeah, for me, I have a same opinion with Andre. Here in Mozambique, we have difficult in online training because teachers are not mastering well this situation, and it makes students not be comfortable with the situation, and the students complain about the training of the teachers. So I think in our case, the Ministry of Education needs to work hard on this and to make the online teaching more affordable for the students. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I add something? Just 10 seconds. I would love to see my students in Brazil more exposed to an international education environment. The pandemic has forced them to do that. And I strongly hope that continues if we have a new normal soon, because it is really important for them to have this international experience.
Yeah. And also just to add to what everybody has said, I think this, there were some questions earlier about, is this going to carry on, is post-pandemic and all of that? I definitely think so, because one of the main roles of the university, besides transferring of knowledge and, you know, getting innovation and research and all of that, is to also prepare our students for the working world, for employability. That is a big issue as well. And, you know, around the world, when you see employability of fresh graduates go down, the universities are the first to get targeted, right? And you're not producing, you know, employable employees. So one of those things is, and digitalization is very important, as I said, with the industry, because everybody is even working online. These are the skills that they are going to need. This is the reality of the years to come. You know, we read every day companies are closing down offices because they realize they can function and are just as effective as working there in a situated. So remotely well working. So this is actually what we are preparing our graduates for as well. Because a lot of industries, not just in education, you're going to see shifting towards digitalization to some extent.
Distance education cannot replace face-to-face education, especially in some schools. We went to Julia's. How can they replace face-to-face education with distance learning? How they're going to teach prospective actors and actresses how to teach, how to open their mouth? You can't mime, you can't show it. You can't show them how to dance, choreography, things like that. You just show them videos or do it yourself. They have to practice. And plus, Phil Jose, New York University organized some seminars and panels during winter. And the American professors admitted that parents, even very rich ones, are beginning to complain because they pay very expensive tuition fees for very famous universities. And they say that we pay for the whole package. We mean not only the higher standard of education, but for our children to live in the campus and socialize with other students. And students miss all these kinds of things. They're isolated. So they keep asking with lawyers from these very famous and universities to lower the fees down greatly.
Thank you so much.
Because,
hello.
So sorry. Yes.
Because that studying in a university also involves socializing with other people, going to the library, even though there's digital library, they can go to the library, they can visit the labs. They can't do it anymore. No matter how well we do it virtually.
Yes, Dr.
Okay.
Luciana? Yeah.
Yes, there is one thing that I would like to share with you. What in Indonesia, the government launched what we call Merdeka Belajar Campus Merdeka, where the students are given chance to take, to study at another other universities. So credit, so they study one semester, and then after that, the credits that they got will be count in their university. And I think one problem related to faculty of education, because of the schools, many schools are closed. So the students who will do their research must be delayed, because unless they change their research design from, for example, pre-experimental research into descriptive. So that's the things that also affect because of the outbreak of the pandemic. Yes.
Right. Thank you so much. I do believe that there are some questions that are in the chat, but we're not really able to address them because we've already exceeded our time. Maybe the speakers could just have a look at them and see whether they are able to respond through chat or not, if it's possible. We have to wrap up actually. Now, before, this is all the time that we have at this moment. So as we are about to end, I would like to invite Professor Philip M. Jose, Emeritus Professor of International Education, Director, Multinational Institute of American Studies, New York University, USA, for the closing remarks.
Okay, I think you can hear me, can you?
Yes, we can.
Good. First of all, I want to thank Prema for initiating and organizing this webinar. And I also want to thank the 8 members of our 2017 Summer Institute for taking part and for presenting provocative, detailed information about how their countries have been responding to the pandemic. It's heartening to see that many of you have stayed in contact with one another. I might add, not unusual among previous groups. I know the group that took part in our 2012 Summer Institute is planning something similar to this later this month in September. I've often thought that one of the best parts of these international institutes is that they've fostered relationships between people from many different countries, both personal relationships and professional relationships, and they have stayed in touch with one another, and I think that's been very positive. So thank you for all of that. Prema had asked me to do 2 things, and we're almost 1 hour beyond the time that I think most of you had anticipated for the webinar. So I'm going to try to keep this as short as possible. The first task that Prema gave me was to summarize what our 8 colleagues and Prema herself have said about the impact of the pandemic on their countries and the higher education institutions in their countries. And that's a very daunting task because the presentations were so detailed and informative. But let me just mention 7 things that I thought were touched upon by everyone, and I think not only applied to the countries involved, but to other countries and to the US. Above all, clearly everyone is aware of the fact there's been an increased dependence on online teaching, distance learning, and on self-study. and this has raised a number of challenges. The first of which several people mentioned was developing effective online teaching strategies. I know many of my colleagues have tried to do so. I too, I can't say that I've succeeded in doing so. The second is that learning outcomes have been limited on the part of students. In part, as Alexa, for example, mentioned, inadequate supervision, limited opportunities for class participation, problems with assessment, and digital fatigue, which I think Prema had mentioned. The third, very important, I think, is social isolation, loneliness for students. And several of you mentioned the implications of that and the need for counseling and psychological advice and so forth. But most important, to create an atmosphere of in-person learning once again, when students can learn from one another and develop relationships. So important, obviously, for students in the age cohort of college. A fourth is the widening inequality, the digital divide between the affluent and the less affluent, who also often have very limited access to internet. A fifth problem, and one that those of us who work in institutions of higher education in the US are acutely aware of, are the limitations on international mobility among students. A sixth, which our Brazilian colleague pointed to, and a factor that has been of great significance in the US is the polarization between the political right and left. And this has politicized the responses to a public health crisis, the pandemic, and in many ways has undermined the effectiveness of various ways of dealing with the pandemic. And then finally, and I think our colleague from Mozambique mentioned this in particular, there's been a problem of renovating dormitories, classroom facilities, and the like, providing for adequate ventilation, social distancing, which are very costly and have affected universities elsewhere. So that's my summary. It's certainly not entirely complete, but my summary of what we've covered. Prema also asked me to say a few things about the impact of the pandemic on American institutions and of higher education. And again, I'll try to keep this very short. Let me say overall, the problem is that American universities and colleges are in the midst of a financial crisis, perhaps the most serious that I recall in my lifetime at this time. The problem stems in part from the way in which higher education is financed in the United States, which differs from a lot of your countries. Let me just point out, I think we didn't quite match the number of students and universities and colleges in India, as our Indian colleague pointed to. But in the US, there are 5,300 universities and colleges. They serve an average of 22 million students per year. And the expense, I'm sorry?
It was just an interruption, Professor Philip.
Did someone have
No.
I heard.
Go ahead.
No?
Yeah, go ahead.
Judith, shall I proceed?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Okay. If I'm speaking too long, just shut me up, okay?
Oh, no. Go ahead.
Okay. The cost of higher education per year in the United States, what we spend on it, is over $525 billion, okay? How is this financed? Well, this is where the differences are between the US and many other countries. The federal government, our national government, provides only 13% of the funding for higher education. And in many ways, it's limited. It's focused really on advanced graduate training, postgraduate training, particularly in the sciences and in medicine, although they fund other activities like our summer institutes, but those are relatively minor. In the past and even today, the principal source of funding for higher education in the United States is state and local funding. The states provide 21% of all of the funding. Local governments, mainly cities and counties, provide an additional 4%. Okay? The contributions of state and local funding to higher education have been steadily declining, and in fact began to decline precipitously after the recession of 2008. And the pandemic, of course, has only exacerbated the decline. The reasons for this is that state and budgets in particulars have been pressed by increased spending on health, increased spending on primary and secondary education, and increased spending on pensions for employees who've retired, who'd worked for state and local governments. The third major area of financing in the United States for higher education is tuition. This is what students pay when they enroll. This now constitutes 20% of all funding of higher education in the United States, and it will steadily increase as the funding at the state level continues to decline, and everybody projects that it will. So it's really tuition. Now, tuition in public universities in the United States have more than quadrupled. The cost of paying for your classes has more than quadrupled since the early 1970s. And in nonprofit private institutions, some of the most prestigious universities in the US and small liberal arts colleges, it's more than double. The question arises, how are students paying for this? And the way in which they're paying for this is they are taking out loans. They go into debt. And this has become and will become the principal form of funding higher education. Just to give you a sense of the dimensions of the indebtedness of students today, in 2020, 55% of all college and university students in the United States have had to take out loans to finance their education. The average amount of a student loan in 2020, the average amount per person, okay, was $38,000, a rather significant sum. The total amount of student debt in 2020 in the United States was 1.6 trillion, not billion, 1.6 trillion dollars. This is simply unsustainable. Yeah. The dependence on tuition had an enormous impact on the financing of higher education in the United States during the pandemic, mainly because enrollments declined by 13%. In addition, and several people mentioned this with regard to their own countries, there was a precipitous decline in the number of international students who could come to the United States because of regulations and restrictions related to the pandemic. And international students have become another major source of financing American universities. For the most part, the best universities, both public and private, including small liberal arts colleges, some of the most prestigious like Smith, Bryn Mawr, and so forth, And universities like NYU, the University of Southern California, University of Michigan, and Princeton, University of Chicago, and the like, have a large number of international students, typically between 15 and 30% of the entire student body in these institutions come from other countries. And this declined. What was the result? Well, the result was that a number of major institutions have had to go into debt during the 2020 and 2021 years. Just to give you some examples of the amount of debt, NYU has projected a deficit of $100 million for the year. The University of Arizona is projecting a loss of $250 million. The University of Michigan is projecting losses of almost $400 million. The University of Wisconsin, $100 million. And even some of the wealthiest universities, Harvard, for example, which has an endowment in excess of $31 billion, has projected a loss of $138 million. Okay, so we have a financial crisis and it's not going away. And the only thing that the pandemic did was to exacerbate a crisis that has been going on because of the way in which higher education is financed in the universities. So what are the consequences of this? I'll just mention a few. The first is that a number of private colleges, nonprofit private colleges with small endowments, many very prestigious institutions are going out of business or merging with one another. They cannot sustain their independence.
Professor Philip, you have around 2 minutes. You have around 2 minutes, Professor Philip.
Okay, I can do that in 1 minute, okay?
Oh, thank you.
The second consequence is that, and I'm sure this has affected all of you, is that teaching loads of full-time faculty have increased. And in addition, in the United States, universities and colleges are hiring part-time, we call them adjunct instructors, and not offering very many full-time positions, which has had a detrimental impact on the quality of education. A third consequence is that less affluent students simply cannot afford to go to college anymore. They can't pay the tuition and they can't sustain the student debt. And finally, and several of you mentioned this, what's happened in our universities is there's been an emphasis on the adoption of cost-saving learning management systems like online courses and prepackaged recorded lectures. And these have had a detrimental effect on faculty. It's reduced the significance of faculty making academic decisions within universities. It has reduced research productivity because there's limited time for research under these conditions, and it has undermined the quality of their instruction. Thank you very much. I'm sorry I took, I think, about 30 seconds beyond the last minute. Thank you, Judith.
Thank you so much, Professor Philip. That ends our webinar today, a collaboration between the American Degree Transfer Program, Toulouse University, Malaysia, the US Embassy, together with the NIAPS members, alumni. We would like to take this opportunity to thank all our distinguished speakers for their time and sharing of knowledge and experiences. We would also like to thank Mr. Akash from the US Embassy, Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, and Professor Philip from the Multinational Institute of American Studies, New York University, USA, for being here today. We would also like to appreciate all our webinar attendees from around the globe for joining us for this webinar. We do hope this session has been eye-opening and food for thought for all. That is all from me. Stay safe, stay strong, and have a good weekend ahead. Goodbye.
Goodbye, Judith. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you so much, Doctor.
Bye.
Thank
you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Judy.
Thank
You did it well.
Oh, thank
How is everybody?
Great.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much, my friends.
Oh,
I'm
sorry, I have to
very
cut you guys
happy
off.
seeing you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Prima. Thank you, Yon. Thank you,
to all
Rose. Thank
Hello,
you,
Tida.
Paul. Thank you, Alaka. Thank you,
Bye.
Andrea.
Thank you,
See you next
Judith.
time.
Thank you to the speakers.
Thank
Thank
you.
you,
Hey,
Miss
Tida,
Prema.
Tida.
Yes,
Hey, Tita,
I'm
how are you,
Tida.
Tita?
Good to see
Yes,
you, Tida.
Prima. Thank you. I'm okay.
You should have joined us as well from Myanmar.
Yes, only me.
Yeah.
Okay.
You were missing. The
I'm
next
happy
one.
to see you. Okay. Thank you so much. Bye bye.
Thank you, ma'am. Assalamualaikum.
Rose.
Hello.
Hello.
Kedar, how are you?
Fine. Thank you, Rose.
Hey,
Are you at the
are you in
at home?
our
You
group? Yes, yes.
you are using the mask.